All right, I think we've got a great crowd here, so we're going to go ahead and get started. So glad everyone could join us. If this is one of your first times on one of our webinars, my name is Mark Stoddard. I run sales and marketing here at ClientSuccess, and I put on all of these webinars, and really excited to have Niels Vinya on with us today. Niels, how are you, man?
I'm doing fantastic, Mark. I'm excited to be here with you. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Yeah, we're pumped. Looks like we've got folks from all over the world. We've got folks from Arizona, Idaho, Ohio, London, LA, New Jersey. We've got a good international crowd. Tallahassee. Ooh, Belgium just popped in there.
Love
Nice.
it.
Tell us about your background. What's behind you, Niels?
Well, we got the one and only Grand Canyon. I'm a recent transplant to the Phoenix area, and a couple weeks ago, we actually went to the South Rim family vacation, checked it out. It is absolutely awe-inspiring. What's
Incredible.
possible over hundreds of thousands of years and a little bit of water and wind and rain.
It's just
It's
incredible,
phenomenal.
man.
So cool. So cool.
It's one of those things where I grew up 3 hours from the Grand Canyon, been there once in my life.
Yeah,
That's all.
fair enough. Fair enough. We've all had those things when we live in the places where we live. We don't exactly act like a tourist, although it's a good idea sometimes
Exactly
to
right.
take some
Exactly
of those
right.
adventures.
Exactly. Well, cool. So Niels, I know we said a bunch of this in the promotion that all of you saw, but Niels runs a consulting firm called Glide Consulting, and he consults on all things related to customer success. And today we're going to be having a discussion much more focused on leadership. And he's got a bunch of really cool insights to share with us. Can everyone I just want to make sure everyone can hear us. I assume everyone can hear us and see us okay. Maybe just give me a quick nod in the chat pane to make sure that the audio and video is working. Looks right. Phil, Liz says everything
That's
works good.
good.
So, well, cool. All right. Very
All
good.
right.
So what we're going to do for the presentation. So Niels has a presentation he's going to share. This is going to be, he'll probably share for 20, 25 minutes or so. And I will keep an eye on the chat pane. My ask is that all your questions, pop them in the chat pane, pop them in the Q&A. And after Niels is done presenting, we'll go ahead and switch over to more of a Q&A.
And
So,
Mark, one suggestion there, as you're typing
please.
in, if you have a question, put question in brackets so that it's easy for Mark to keep track of, because
Good
I'm
call.
going to have you do some activities and some things in the chat as well. And we just want to
Good
make it
call.
easy to parse out.
Good call. Good call. Well, cool. Before we jump there, I want to pay a couple bills. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about ClientSuccess. A lot of you, just from looking at the chat pane, there's a lot of new folks who perhaps have never heard anything about ClientSuccess or know who we are, what we do. So I'd love to give you just a brief intro into who we are, what we do, why we put on these webinars, why we have folks like Niels on. We are a customer success growth platform. And so what does that mean? We are a software company that helps with all things related to customer success. So we're going to help with your onboarding, your adoption, your renewals, your growth, anything that your customer success team needs to drive a great customer experience, to take that experience, give really good insights into your leadership team, collaborate on behalf of customers, all with the goal of driving better retention and growth. You see here on the slide, we are a leader on G2 in the customer success category. Not last month, back in June, we won the 2020 Cody Award for the best customer success solution on the market. We're thrilled to win that. And so if you've never looked at us, or if you're thinking about kind of your customer success process, kind of leveling up your customer success game, a lot of you are thinking about that. It's Q4. Let us know. You can find us easily. I'm at clientsuccess.com. You can hit me directly. I'm Mark with K at clientsuccess.com, and look forward to chatting with anyone that wants to learn a little bit more. So that's me paying my bills. And so
And
I'm
Mark,
gonna
let me help you pay a bill just for a second, because I was a former VP of customer success multiple times, and I was a former client of ClientSuccess,
indeed you
and
were.
can say that having been a user of the solution in past times, that I got a tremendous amount of value out of it. I love the partnership with not only the solution, but also the team and the thought leadership you guys brought to the table. It was always an exceptional experience. So just wanted to help set stage
Awesome.
there that I'm part of your crowd too.
Appreciate that. And speaking of thought leadership, the reason that we do these webinars is that's exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to expand the thought leadership of customer success all over the world. And so we've had, I think to this point this year, probably about 40 or so of these types of webinars from different folks in customer success. We've had folks that are, running customer success teams day to day. We've had folks that have run customer success teams and are more in kind of like consulting or investing roles. And we've got advice on how to build all different parts of your customer success process. If you want to start a renewal team, or if you're looking to start an onboarding team, or if you are looking to scale your customer success team up. We had Peter Armali on just a couple of weeks ago from Oracle, and his topic was all about his experience is all about big team customer success and how to scale and grow those. And so if you haven't seen it yet, I'd invite all of you after we're done with the session today. First of all, we're going to post the recording and the slides and everything from our session today on our website and on our YouTube channel. But we also have all of the sessions we've done in the past posted to the Client Success YouTube channel. So just Google Client Success YouTube. It's a really cool masterclass on everything related to customer success. Every week I get 3 or 4 people reaching out to me saying, oh, I just started a new role, or I'm looking to jump into customer success, and I've spent hours upon hours with your webinars, and I've basically got a master's degree in customer success. So that's a really good resource for everybody. And we're going to add this to the library. And without further ado, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn it over to Mr. Vinya.
All right, let's do it.
Let's do it,
And
man.
I love these sessions. Big fan of them from that standpoint of being the masterclass, right? And you guys bring an awful lot to the table. I love it. Honored to be here to be a member of that community here today. So leadership, right? It is the source of and solution to all of your customer success challenges. So to kick things off here, I've got a few questions for you. If you've followed me for any period of time, been to any of my presentations, you know that I always have some good, juicy questions up front. And what I want you to do, if you answer yes to any of these questions, I want you to type in yes in the chat. So don't worry about writing the question or which one it is, just write yes. And if multiple of these, every time you say, yeah, that resonates, type in yes in the chat. Okay, Mark's gonna keep a tally for me and see how many yeses we're getting across the board, and just we'll keep an eye on things. So I wanna know if you have ever struggled with any aspect of leadership. If you have, just drop in a yes in the chat. I want to know if you've ever felt like nobody in your company understands what exactly it is that customer success does. If you answered yes, type it in the chat.
I've
I want to
lost
know.
count of the tally. There's
Okay,
about,
good. I just want to make sure we're on par here. That this stuff is resonating, because this is what we're ultimately going to be talking about today. And if we make sure I want everybody to know you're in the same boat, right? Everybody, look at all the yeses. Look at the flow that's going. You are not alone. Number one, single most important thing in our world. Okay, number 3. If you've ever felt like an imposter who could be outed at any time as a fraud, right? And please also know that I've said yes to every single one of these questions at various points in my leadership journey too. If you've ever felt like you were personally at fault for every single churned account, I want you to type in yes in the chat. If you've ever wanted to get to the next level of your career, but you really just didn't know what to do when your boss told you, oh, you just need to be more strategic, type in yes into the chat. It's one of my favorite all-time questions that I have the greatest response to and can break down in just a matter of seconds.
I'm excited for that one. I actually spent an hour on the phone with an old friend of mine who was looking to make a jump in her career, and that was exactly the feedback she got.
Yep. Let's put a pin in that for our discussion post the slides, and let's dig into that, because there's one very powerful question that can destroy that. I would call it a kind of it's a get out of jail card. It's like, it makes it for the manager. Anybody who says that, one, is not demonstrating true leadership skills, and number 2 is taking the easy way out. It's just the generic glad happy term. So let's discuss that afterwards. If you've ever struggled to get your CS team to take ownership and do what you need them to do without you telling them, type in yes in the chat. This might be things like filling in and updating all the content and all the relevant assets in your client success dashboard, in your Salesforce instance, in your you name it platform, in your spreadsheet, right? There's a million things that we struggle to get other people to do, and sometimes we just don't know why. Okay, so if any of these resonated with you and you typed in yes to any of them, the good news is you're in the right place. Because
Jason says he
here,
feels attacked by all of these questions.
who said that one?
Jason says he feels attacked
Jason.
by all of these.
Jason, hey. Jason, you're on my level, dude. Don't worry about it. We're in good shape. You're in good hands. It's not an attack. There's a bright side on the other side. Because here's what we're going to cover today. You're going to discover the difference between an amateur and a professional leader. And here's a hint. It has absolutely nothing to do with the amount of time that you've spent in a leadership role. We're also going to find out the 5 biggest leadership killers. These are mistakes that I see people make over and over again. And I'm also going to tell you what to do about them. And lastly, as I was alluding to just before there with Mark, we're going to have a Q&A and customer success leadership discussion. So as you are thinking of those questions as we're going through this, be sure to bracket question and then type your question after that in the chat so we can keep track of everything. All right. As I go through these things, the pieces that resonate, I just want you to drop in the chat, right? Again, this is about community. It's about bringing people together. It's about seeing that you're not alone and everybody else is on the same level and same page as you. So type in your takeaways, the ahas. That was really good. I hadn't thought about that before. Just put it in the chat, and it's just going to be a running stream. And when you get the replay after this, it'll be a good reminder of all the things that went through. Okay, another question that I want you to enter into the chat. The single most important thing in your career is, and I can't see the chat right now, so I'm going to ask Mark, like, what do we got? What's some things that are popping up?
So focus, actually, there were 3 people right in a row that wrote focus.
Okay,
To
focus.
enjoy myself, happiness,
Good.
collaboration, flexibility, stability.
All right. Okay, good. Okay, all incredibly important, but I'm talking the single most important thing. And there's a hint because it's in the topic of this presentation. Not really much of a surprise. It is leadership skills. Okay, the single most important thing in your career is leadership skills. Now, I didn't know this early on in my career. I literally had zero idea that this was actually important or something that I should pay attention to. And I went on a 7-year journey trying to figure out where on earth do I fit in the professional world. And when I say journey, I literally mean journey because there really wasn't much of a destination. I would literally just bounced around from job to job, company to company, trying to find something that was entertaining and important and felt like I actually contributed. I did everything, literally, from being a software engineer, of which I was terrible at, to being a bag carrying door-to-door Xerox sales rep, which I was equally as terrible at that. But these extremes were incredibly polarizing. It didn't work for me. It was the stuff in the middle that started to make sense, like the things along the lines of consulting and solutions engineering and sales consulting, a little bit of marketing. But then what happened was I got fed up and I finally decided to go back to grad school. And I got an MBA in management and organizational behavior. And this was a significant turning point in my career for showing and demonstrating to me where my passion and alignment really was. And it was in that moment in grad school, there was a very specific point. I'm not going to get into too much detail today, but there was a very specific point that I turned pro. And I can explain what that means here in a minute, but essentially what it is I decided to take control. Over those 7 years being on that journey really wasn't a lot of fun. I bounced around and didn't know where I was going because I was never in the driver's seat. I was not the chief. I was not making the calls. I was letting other people dictate for me where they thought I would go, where they thought I should do. And I gladly let them do it. I didn't take control, but it was in that moment in grad school, there's a very specific Saturday morning where it happened that I turned pro. And the results of turning pro, that was back in 2007-ish, the results following that grad school experience of a couple of years and then getting back and getting in my first role in customer success is that I went from a CSM individual contributor working on the front lines day in and day out with customers to a VP of customer success in 30 months, 2.5 years. That was it, lightning fast. I built high performing teams every step of the way. Then in January of 2015, I started the very first customer success consulting firm that ever existed in the history of the world, right? And I became a leadership coach and have logged over 500 hours of leadership coaching and training with my clients and incredible organizations. This summer, I also wrote a best-selling book on, guess what, leadership. It's called 30-Day Leadership Playbook, your guide to becoming the leader you have always wanted to be. And I'm going to take you through a lot of the principles that I cover in this book in a fun way so that I can help highlight where some of the challenges that you might be facing, if any of those questions resonated with you before, and give you actionable, specific strategies on how to address them and move forward. You can pick up a copy of this book at 30dayleadership.com/playbook. Now, all of this success that I had, that I just went through, all of this success came directly from that moment that I turned pro, started focusing on the growth and development of my leadership skills. That's why I say it is the single most important thing, because there was nothing else in my career that changed more than that decision at that point way back in 2007. Now, before we get into the mistakes and the killers, I need to make a disclaimer. This presentation is intended to show you a different perspective. I am not judging you. This is not a judgment. Do not take this as a personal attack on anything you are doing. I am simply trying to highlight what may be under the surface or may be present, but you might not exactly see because you haven't looked at it from this perspective. So what I ask is that you just see this with an open mind. Even if you've heard me talk about one of these concepts before, or you've heard somebody else talk about this concept, know that your perspective today and your ability to take in a learning and have an aha from today is different than any other point in time, because the amount of experience and context and situations you've been through to this point in time right now on November 12th, 2020, right, has never happened before. So you have complete ability to take in things in a completely new way. That's what I ask of you. Okay. So with that disclaimer out of the way, this is not judgment. This is showing you a different perspective. Let's get to mistake number one. So mistake number one is not having the right psychology. Now you might be saying, wait a second, psychology, I thought this was all about leadership. What the heck does leadership have to do with psychology? Well, it has a lot to do with leadership. There's an incredible quote that I'm going to read for you here in just a second from one of my favorite books. It's called The War of Art. It's by an author named Stephen Pressfield. And so much of the essence of this book is summed up right here. And I'm going to read it out. Don't worry about reading it because it's on the slide, but I'll take you through it. Okay. Tiger Woods is the consummate professional. It would never occur to him, as it would to an amateur, that he knows everything or can figure everything out on his own. On the contrary, he seeks out the most knowledgeable teacher and listens with both ears. The student of the game knows that the levels of revelation that can unfold in golf, as in any art, are inexhaustible. Okay, this is an incredibly powerful quote. There's so much wrapped up in here. I want to highlight two very specific things. Number one, it would never occur to him, as it would to an amateur, that he knows everything or can figure everything out on his own. So this is a primary mistake I see all the time. The go it alone strategy, right? Oh, I got this. I learned that. I have access to this. I'm fine on my own. I'll figure this out, right? Number two is the student of the game knows that the levels of revelation that can unfold in golf, as in any art, are inexhaustible. Guess what? Leadership is an art, just like golf, right? How many actual kind of swings are there? How many clubs are there in golf? There's only a handful. It's a finite number. Yet the level of revelations are inexhaustible. Same thing with leadership. The level of revelations in every strategy that I'm going to tell you about and everything that I cover in my book are inexhaustible, right? These strategies are incredibly powerful and can be applied in different ways at different points in your career. So to highlight the difference between the amateur leaders and the professional leaders, amateur leaders believe that they can figure everything out for themselves, or they think they have to. Professional leaders, on the other hand, seek out the most knowledgeable teacher and they invest in themselves. This was the fundamental difference of what enabled me to turn pro way back in 2007. Right? I went from thinking I could do everything myself and trying to go down that path to then acknowledging that the investment in myself is what was most important, not what somebody else, what I was trying to figure out on my own. right? I wanted to find people who had already done what I had wanted to do, and I wanted to pay them so I could take the fast track and get to where I wanted to go quicker, because I could learn from everything they learned and they would teach me. So here's what to do if this is the case for you, and if you're in this situation, not already in the professional place when it comes to your psychology. Number one is turn pro. And number two is bulletproof your leadership psychology. Okay, let's go on to mistake number two. This is what I call ignoring the most important contract. Now, amateur leaders on one side will make assumptions about their team's behavior. They will say things like, I have high expectations for my team. Frankly, anybody could really say that. But here's the key. If the team cannot articulate what those expectations are, it's a waste of time. And there's a giant gap in between the leader and the employees. Okay? They live with frustration from poor behavior. And as a result, they struggle to drive accountability. Now, professional leaders, on the other hand, eliminate assumptions. They eliminate ambiguity, and they make the unspoken spoken. You might be like, Nils, what are you talking about? Unspoken spoken? Where are you going with this? All right, so here's what to do. There's something to create which is called a social contract. A social contract represents the unspoken agreement between an employee and employer, and a manager and employee. And whenever these two parties come together, they inherently have expectations of each other that are often unspoken. The problem occurs when one side does something to violate the other side's social contract, and then you get a pinch point, what's called a pinch point, and you get a lot of frustration, and the other side has no idea what they actually did because they never knew it was an expectation. So creating a social contract is the work of bringing those expectations to the surface and agreeing with your team and your individuals and everybody who is part of your group, and ultimately getting on the same page so that you can all hold each other accountable. This is the single most important contract when it comes to leadership. Now let's go on to mistake number three. Nobody knows what you do. In the customer success space, this is probably one of the biggest and most egregious ones, period, because frankly, nobody has any idea what customer success does. And ultimately, they are working to understand that because we're the new kids on the block. Everybody knows what sales does. Everybody knows what marketing does. Everybody knows what product and engineering and support do. Nobody knows what customer success does. So if you as a leader are not able to articulate that, then you're going to have an awful lot of trouble from a leadership perspective. So amateur leaders on one side talk to other leaders just like they talk to their team. They suffer from what I call the here's what I did syndrome. And as a result, they struggle to build trust with other leaders. Now, you can see the greatest demonstration of this at most conference presentations. This is where it comes out, the here's what I did syndrome, where a leader gets up on stage and says, here's what I did. I did this step and this step and this step, and you can too. I'll give you all the email templates, right? That is a gigantic waste of time, right? Far more effective is to take the professional leader route, which means you communicate at the appropriate level of context based on your audience, because you have a framework to articulate your work to anyone, and you can ensure that others know what you do, right? So the ability to communicate your value and expertise at a level that is consumable by anybody, especially people who have no context for what you do on a day-to-day basis, is at the core of your ability to be effective in a leadership position, especially in customer success. So here's what to do. Build a framework, right? This is the way you are going to be able to articulate your value, your expertise, your team's production, everything that you do at the right level of context based on the audience. Mistake number four, metrics are lagging indicators. This is one of my favorite ones because we all suffer from this at some point in time, and especially in the customer success world. So on the amateur leader side of the spectrum, what we're talking about is a focus only on the high level metrics. If you've ever said or been told, like, churn is high, go figure it out, that is an example of an amateur leader in this category, with this mistake. Or if you've ever said, churn's high, but I trust my team to figure it out, They're experts. I keep harping on the fact that churn is way too high this quarter and they need to go do it. I'm not going to micromanage them. They know how to do this on their own. It's a load of baloney, right? They do not measure behavior in a way that drives change. That's the key fundamental difference here. And the professional leaders are identifying leading indicators for behavior. And ultimately, they create metrics that drive behavior. So churn, we all know, is a lagging indicator. NPS, we all know, is a lagging indicator. These are things that when reported are critically important, but when reported, they can't really drive any activity. You either had a churn or you didn't. There's nothing really you could do. But there are a million other activities up to that point at which that happened. And from a leadership perspective, that's where the focus needs to go when it comes to the metrics that you use with your team, the leading indicator behaviors, right? And that way you can ultimately drive accountability for the behaviors that when executed properly, ultimately result in the reduction of the lagging indicator, which is churn or NPS or whatever that is. So here's what to do in this case. Identify behavior-based leading indicators. Single most important thing to transform from just talking generically at a high level about churn's a big problem to very specific activities that you can actually hold people accountable to, that you know that if executed at a very high level, ultimately will deliver great results towards that lagging indicator. And finally, mistake number 5, not mastering time. Now, those of you who have been familiar with me for any period of time know that I've spent probably almost as much time talking about time mastery than any other CS topic, period, because it's still pervasive as probably one of the single largest things that hold people back at an individual level, at a manager, director, VP level. This is a significant part of a lot of the leadership problems that I come across. So on the amateur leader side, amateur leaders think that they can't change what's on their calendar. They believe that back-to-back meetings means they're important and that they are always busy, but they're not necessarily productive. There's a big difference between busy and productive, right? So that's the mindset that is going on with the amateur leaders. Now, professional leaders, on the other hand, take control. They use tools to help control their focus. And most importantly, they decide where to spend their time instead of having it decided for them. So here's what to do. Answer one simple question. Who is in control? And there's only 2 answers. It's either you or it's your environment. And when I say your environment, I mean your emails, your customers, your manager, your execs, your peers, your team, everything else in the world. Right? There's only one answer to that question of who's in control. You cannot overcome that mistake until you make that decision. I think you can probably guess what the decision needs to be in order to truly take control. So we covered the 5 leadership mistakes that I see being made over and over and over again. And I want to tell you about how to learn more about how to overcome each of these mistakes and many, many more through my book called 30-Day Leadership Playbook. The book is broken down into 4 key pillars. First up is leading yourself. This is all about psychology. This is where you're going to bulletproof your leadership psychology. This is how you're going to learn how to master your time. You're going to discover the 5 new rules of leadership. Then I go into leading others. This is where the element of the social contract comes into play. How to do that, how to put that into action. Why is it so important beyond just what I told you today? And also how to use coaching skills in a business context to build incredible trust and relationships with your team and with other leaders. Then we get into leading with communication. This is all about the frameworks, right? Frameworks and presentations. This is the single most probably overlooked area for the vast majority, especially of CS leaders, because of that communication piece. The ability for you to communicate your expertise in a way that other people can understand. Right? I go through very specific detail on how to create frameworks, very specific detail on how to deliver unstoppable presentations that are all taken from my direct experience in being able to do this successfully as a consultant, as a VP, as a speaker at industry events and earning top rankings at every single one. And finally, leading with metrics. right? Digging into exactly how to identify those behavior-based metrics that we talked about and get away from the lagging indicators and focus more on the things that you can control so that you can ultimately drive accountability. My goal in writing this playbook was to provide the incredible guidance, coaching, expertise, strategies, techniques that I've tested myself, have coached over the last probably 10 years with my clients, and brought those to the table in a way that you can easily consume and pick up, find the right strategy for you, read it, put it into action, and get immediate results. So if you'd like to learn more, you can get a copy of the book at 30dayleadership.com/playbook. The book is selling right now for a limited time for only $10. And I'm also going to include over $200 in free bonuses. The audiobook version, professionally recorded with a voiceover actor, the quick reference cards, which contain the most important information from every chapter, and my leadership power pack training. All of those are my gifts to you for free when you order the book for just $10. And I'll also personally sign it and ship it to you for free in the US. Outside the US, there's a small shipping fee. So Mark, that takes us through the 5 biggest leadership mistakes. Now it's time for us to dig into some leadership discussion on the CS side, handle a few questions. Let's get to it, man.
All right, let's do it. That was awesome. And I mean, we could probably dig into any one of those topics for the next, day or two, but we'll try to get through as much of the Q&A as we have time for. So yeah, if there are any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat pane or the Q&A. I know Zoom has both options there, so sometimes it's a little bit confusing to know which one. But I'll just kind of start going through questions, and I've got a few questions of my own. There's some questions in the chat pane that I'll kind of start going through. Alejandra asked a question, could you give some examples about the behavior-based leading indicators? What do those look like? How do you put those in place? What are the right behavior-based leading indicators? And the question I will put on top of hers is, once you know what those behavior-based leading indicators are, do you actually compensate somebody based on the behavior leading indicators, or do you comp somebody based on the outputs? Kind of curious to get your thoughts on both sides of that question.
Cool. Absolutely. All right. So examples here. Let's take a quick peek. So like high level example I shared in a little bit ago was around churn, right? Churn is the deciding thing. It's how the organization as a whole is measured. From a comp perspective, to touch on your point, Mark, churn and retention and whatever the target is for the team, that is still remains like the primary thing, because that's ultimately the greatest measure of how effective the organization is working. Even though I know that CS isn't able to solve every problem, but we are absolutely responsible for ensuring that problems get solved. So that lagging indicator from a compensation perspective is still my view on where you need to focus. However, from a leadership perspective, to get to that number that you want, you have to drive all the other behaviors and know that that is just going to tell the story of how well you drove the other behaviors. So let's take a look at QBRs, or how about executive presence in a QBR? Okay, we all know that executives are busy, and sometimes, despite our best efforts, they don't attend our QBRs for 6, 12, 18 months, right? Well, what do we know? We also know that in some of those cases, some of those client accounts, we have a high level of executive uncertainty around our solution. So one of the conclusions we might draw is that if we had more executive engagement in our QBRs, then there's a higher likelihood that we would have a better chance at knowing something was going to happen to us, or within our realm of what we do, before it happens. Okay, so one of the leading indicators might be the number of QBRs with executive presence, right? Maybe that's 1 out of every 2. Maybe it's every single one, whatever it is. So now the focus, instead of just focusing on churn, if I'm working with the CSM and I'm working with my team, I'm about, okay, what's our strategy for how we're going to get the right executive into our QBR? How many people can we rally around from our side and from their side to get this person on the call? If we know that if we get them on the call, we have a much better chance of down the line getting out what we want.
I think that's really interesting because what you've added there, what the mistake that I see a lot of people go is to me, they go partway on the leading indicator, meaning they track a leading indicator.
Yeah.
They might track the number of calls that are made or the number of, in this example, QBRs.
Yeah.
What you've done there, I think, is you've added a quality component
Hmm.
to the leading indicator. Yes,
Yeah.
you can have a QBR, but in order for it to be an effective, a good one, you got to make sure there's an executive there. So for me, the way I always think about whatever metrics I'm tracking, I always try to think about, what's the input metric that I'm tracking, what's the output metric that I'm obviously shooting for, but then what's the quality component that I want to make sure that I'm gauging my input. And that can go for anything from a marketing standpoint. Oftentimes I'll track not only the amount of traffic I get to the website, but also at the same time track my bounce rate, because I can drive
Yeah.
a bunch of traffic to my website, but if my
Hmm.
bounce rate's terrible, well, then I know I just
Right.
got a
Right.
bunch of useless traffic. And the same thing goes for any of these metrics. So any
That's
other things that you'd add on the leading indicator side?
Yeah. So anything, here's the simplest, most important piece is anything can be measured. Anything, right? Doesn't mean that everything should be measured. However, the behavior that you want to drive needs to be measured. So if I want my team to get executives into QBRs, I need to measure the executive presence in QBRs, right? If I want my team to walk away with a set of jointly owned, mutually agreed upon goals from every QBR, I need to measure the number of QBRs where we walk away with mutually agreed upon goals, right? So whatever it is that is most important, that are going to be the things that you hypothesize that if you do them right and execute them at a very high level, are going to produce the greatest result down the line in terms of our renewal and expansion capabilities, that is what you're going to want to turn into the behavior-based metrics and measure your team on. And guess what? Your team will enjoy that too, because it sucks to be on the receiving end of hearing that churn is bad, go fix it. There's literally nothing you can do. So more important is, wait, what can I actually control? You can control your strategy around how to get an exec to the QBR, focus on that, focus the team on that, and everybody can collaborate and come up with new ideas, and you'll get all kinds of inspiration that you never thought you had before.
I'm going to jump down to a very tactical question that Gleb asks, since you brought up the QBR, like a playbook wise, like if you expect an executive on the QBR and you get on there and she's committed to be there and she doesn't show up, what do you do? Do you cancel it? Do you record it? Do you say, oh man, I wish she could have made it? What's your advice there?
Yeah, Gleb, wonderful to see you again and hear you again, my friend. Gleb and I worked together many years ago.
Awesome.
So in this case, there's a number of different ways that you can go. I think there's a lot of situational context that's going to determine the right approach. If this were a renewal on the line and high uncertainty around what we were going to do going forward and where we really stood, I'd probably punt and use it as a forcing function that, look, guys, we can't have this conversation until so-and-so executive is present. Let's just take a step back and reschedule and do that. Okay, that's one scenario. Now, if this were just a run-of-the-mill normal QBR in the 6-month mark or 12-month mark or whatever, no big things are on the line, and you could still have a meaningful conversation with the individual who is on the other side who was attending and plan out what the goals are for the next quarter, then I think it would be okay to continue with the conversation, as long as the end result of the conversation and the outputs and the goals and the direction and everything that was encapsulated in the meeting was communicated through to the executive within a short period of time afterwards, whether that was via you or the CSM, whether that was via the sponsor, whoever you were working with on the other side, whether that was through your presentation PDF'd and sent along with an executive summary. The visibility needs to be there. And again, the situational context is going to depend on how extreme you get on the, drawing the line that we're not going to do this without them.
Something I love to do in that case where you're going to send the follow-up. I think in a lot of cases, yeah, we send the PDF, the follow-up. Something I love to do though is there's plenty of different apps that allow you to send a recording of you actually going through it. Call it Vidyard, call it Loom, call it Zoom, whatever it is.
Yeah.
There's a lot of ways to say, I can send the PDF and I can send an email. Chances are that email is going to get skimmed and probably not read through. So one thing I really like to do is always send the video, and this is exactly what we went through. And that to me gets oftentimes a little bit better engagement from the executive. So
agree. Nothing beats a short little video, hearing a voice. If you can get them to play it, it's phenomenally effective.
Agreed. Agreed.
Yeah.
So let's see other questions. So Melissa asked a question related to, I'll just read it directly. So how would you define or draw the line between seeking feedback and seeking consensus in, strategy development and decision making? I know I personally, I've sat in plenty of meetings that it feels like the decision just needs to be made, and we
Mhm.
sit there and we drive toward consensus, and sometimes it takes far too long to make a decision. And then
Yep.
on the other end, I've been in meetings where an executive comes in and makes a decision that is completely out of what everybody else in the room is thinking.
Yep.
Any thoughts on how to think about that?
Yeah, so again, context is going to play a critical part as to what is the nature of this and what is the timeline with which we're dealing. Ultimately, as a leader, your responsibility is to make the hard decisions, period. Like there's no getting away from that. You can't consensus your way out of leadership. Don't try it. It is a gigantic waste of time. Okay, everybody needs, it's a good thing to have everybody give their input and provide their perspective, but ultimately it's your call. And that's where I would land on this. So if you're in a situation where you're not entirely sure what to do and everybody else is looking to you, waiting for this, or just kind of like going back and forth, make a decision, right? Here's the truth. Make a decision, because that decision is the best decision that you could make with the information you have available at that point in time. You might change your decision in a week or a month or a year or whatever. It doesn't matter. Just make a decision.
Yep.
So in those cases, gather the input, get everything, and then make a decision. If it's wrong, that's okay. You can change it in the future. Know that nothing's ever set in stone, especially in how fast our world's changing. So be definitive though, and don't waffle and say, well, kind of maybe we should wait and see how this goes for another 6 months. Like that's purgatory from a leadership perspective. Be clear, make a decision, provide the reason why you made the decision, and just move on and go forward.
That last point there, I think, is the key there. It's I'm making a decision based on the information that I have at my hand on my plate right now,
Yep.
and communicating here's why that decision was made.
Yep.
For me, being on the receiving end of many decisions that are made, I'd say 9 times out of 10, if I disagree with a decision, but the leader does a really good job of communicating, here's why I came to that conclusion. I don't always come around,
Yeah.
but I am far more likely to at least go along with it if I
Mm-hmm.
understand and I can see the logic. And there actually is logic. Like sometimes I've seen decisions get made and there's really no logic or thought process put into it. Those are the ones that I
Yeah.
struggle with.
Yeah.
And that's a whole other leadership discussion, is making sure that the decisions that you make are based on data, informed intuition, something like that. So
Yeah. 100%. Yep. Absolutely.
cool.
Where to next?
Let's see here. Jason asked a question. I'm a CS team of one right now, operating under sales and marketing leadership.
Mm-hmm.
We could probably just say yes to have another 1,000 people say yes in the chat pane to how many fit that bill. So what should be my number one focus? To establish myself as a leader as well as an individual contributor for when my team grows. And in addition to Jason's question, there's a bunch of questions of like, I'm an individual contributor trying to make that next leap. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what are some of the things to think about? So maybe let's kind of like expand Jason's question a little bit to think about like, how do I make that jump from individual contributor to team leader, whether or not it's me building the team
Mm-hmm.
or me getting a promotion? Just kind
Yeah.
of help us think through that a little bit.
Yeah, there's a couple levels of this to attack. Number one is the psychology piece that will happen when, or that needs to happen when you do make that shift. We'll come back to how to make the shift in a second. But when you do make that shift, the most difficult transition anybody ever makes in their professional career is going from an individual contributor where your focus and your attention and your control, frankly, is on you, to a leader where now your focus, energy, and attention needs to be on other people, and you lose all control and it stops being about you. Right. And that comes back to the psychology piece, knowing that your single most important job is to make other people successful in that being your team. Right. So if you are in that transition, you are in that kind of quasi, player coach role and trying to get to the coach completely role, make sure that that psychology piece is of the utmost importance to make sure it's built into you. That's what I mean. And when I was talking about bulletproofing your leadership psychology, knowing what you are really responsible for and doing is ultimately making sure other people are successful. How successful you were before or what you did or how you did it, frankly, doesn't really matter, because everybody else is going to have a
Sometimes
different
it's your
perspective.
detriment. If all you can talk about is
Oh,
when I
100%.
did it, when I was in your shoes,
Yeah.
like times have changed.
That's right.
You were an individual contributor years ago.
Yeah.
Guess what? This is 2020. Like
Yeah.
90% of what you did in 2019 doesn't work today. So
even
maybe even
even more
90%.
so in this year, but well, we're pretty close. Okay, so now on the how to make this transition and how to position yourself for a transition, right? Even if you're a team of one, or if maybe you're on a team of three and like, well, I want to be the one who takes over the team lead spot here. And I went through this myself as a CSM. I was promoted to the team lead of a group of peers. On Friday, I was a peer sitting next to my friends. And on Monday, I was a manager of three of my peers sitting next to them at the exact same table, right? It is a challenge. So in order to position yourself in the best possible way for that next step, what I recommend is that you think about everything that you need to do that outside by putting you and your needs on the table, on the side of the table. So again, you don't matter. And I don't mean that, literally, you matter, of course, as a person, but your needs, whether or not you need a promotion to get more money to pay for something or to take a vacation or to handle a new kid or whatever it is, does not matter. No promotion is ever given because somebody needed something. Promotions are given because people contribute more value than they did before. So if you're sitting in that position, you have to look at the environment you're in. Let's say you're in sales, in the sales team, just like what that question came from. If you're in the sales team, okay, there are things that your leadership wants. And if you know what it is that your leadership wants, chances are, if you're in the sales team, they want more revenue, and you come up with a strategy for how to deliver more of what they want, that is going to be received very well, and you are going to be seen in a different light than if you just went along and did the things that you thought were good for your own sake. Okay, so this is an element of being aware of your surroundings in the business as a whole, as well as the department, depending on the size of org that you're in, and acknowledging that whatever you need is not necessarily the most important thing. Even if you think that building a customer success philosophy throughout the company is the most important thing, and you're not inside a company that believes that, it's not going to work. You're just going to waste a lot of time. So acknowledge the environment that you're in. If you're in a sales focused company, figure out how to drive more sales. Do it in a way that is authentic to you and authentic to a customer success vision, but figure out a way to deliver the thing that they want. And ultimately that will help position you as a leader in their eyes because you're helping them look good and helping them get what they want. Much the same that we do with our clients, right? So that's what I would say on how to position yourself in the best possible way to get promoted.
What I find is that in my experience, having seen, dozens, if not hundreds of different, let's call it leadership types of promotions at different points of my career, more often than not, it kind of goes to the next logical choice. Rarely am I super surprised when I see somebody getting promoted from role A to role B.
Yeah.
And to me, that a lot of times comes back to, there's a piece of advice that David Cancel, CEO of Drift, he had, there was a cool podcast. I used to work with him back in a former life. And he shared some advice that on their Seeking Wisdom podcast a couple of years ago, but I share this advice all the time whenever I get this. And it's a rule that he had that I've adopted into my teams. And he calls it a 6-1-20 rule. And what he says is, if you want to get promoted on one of my teams for 6 months, I need you doing 100% of the day job. I don't, if you're a CSM, all your renewals are in on time, all your stuff's updated. If you're a sales rep, you're hitting your number. I don't need to worry at all about your day job for at least 6 months. And you're doing 20% of the next job. So 6-1-20, you're doing 20% of the next job. So if you want to be the team lead, well, you need to figure out ways to just, be a leader within the team. Take the next two CSMs who have just been hired, take them under your wing. And so taking some stuff off your manager's plate and saying, hey, I'm going to do an extra call or two with the new CSMs every week. And there's a lot of things where it's just, those are the types of things that for me turn into somebody being the next logical choice to do something. Right.
Yeah. 100%.
Awesome.
Do it there before. And there are opportunities, no matter what environment you're in, what company you're in, what size, what team, whatever, there are always opportunities if you look at it through this lens. Again, your needs and stuff go on the side. You look at the organization, say, how could I add more value to this place? Just like you were sitting there with your customer saying, how can I add more value to this customer? It's the exact same thing. And ultimately it'll get you a great result. I love the 6-1-20 though. That's phenomenally well better said than what I did.
Yep. Let's see. So we got 10 minutes left. I don't think we're gonna have time to get through all the questions. We're gonna keep going though. Aaron actually jumped back to the question I asked at the very beginning on the be more strategic statement.
Ooh, good.
So when you get
I,
that,
I want to hit this one.
yeah, let's dig
Okay,
into that
so
one.
let's role play this for a second, Mark.
Yep.
I'm the individual contributor here. You're my boss, and you are. I'm like, Mark, I need a promotion. I want a promotion. Blah blah blah. And you deliver that line to me. So I'll give you the response. I want to see how you might respond in this situation to the question I'm gonna ask. Okay, shoot.
So I really love what you've been doing, Nils. It's you've been hitting your numbers. When you start thinking about that next step, the thing I'd love for you to think about and to focus on is, how do you be more strategic? You've got a good reputation as someone who's tactical and can do the day job. I haven't seen as much what I'd like to see on the strategic side.
Mark, I appreciate the feedback and understand. To make sure I'm on the same level with you, um, first, I'd like to understand how you would know if I was being more strategic.
So for me in our example, what I'd think about is what are the kind of projects or initiatives that you're taking on that are more than just hitting your numbers and satisfying your customers.
Okay.
That to me is when I think, strategic. That's the types of things I think about. And then I got a dozen examples of other people that have done things, but
Okay. So you see, if I did not ask that question, I would have no idea that that was how you qualify strategic and what your definition of strategic means. Strategic is a loaded word. It is one of the worst. It's one of the best and worst. I mean, granted, I use it a lot too. However, everyone has a different definition, and it is those loaded words are kind of like scapegoats for a lot of leaders when they're not comfortable having a hard conversation about specifics. They will talk in generalities. This gets you on the amateur leader side, like we were talking about before. So ask the one question: how would you know if I was being more strategic? It is a stumper. I've asked this to bosses in the past. I have gotten blank stares for long periods of time. It is awkward because what you're saying is, I don't accept the fact that you're going to give me some generality as a way to brush me off.
mhm,
That's effectively what you're saying, but you're doing it in a very polite way and saying, look, in order for me to be strategic, I need to know what it means to you, because I could do the things that I think are strategic, and you could look at that and be like, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? So we
mhm.
have to align on exactly the definitions of that. Now, in that scenario, if you told me about these projects and other things that you believe are strategic, then that actually gives me some insight on a next step to take. And I say, okay, I get it now. What I'm going to do is take this back, think about this, come up with a plan to address these specific areas, present the plan to you, get your feedback, get your validation that I'm on the right track, and then I'm going to go execute the crap out of these things. Right?
Perfect.
That
Perfect.
would be an A+ interaction between an employee and employer if that ever arose. So number one, first ask the question, any loaded term, how would you know if I was being more strategic? Or an alternative is, what does strategic mean to you? Okay, until you clarify that and until you qualify that, you cannot get past it. It will be a giant fog and cloudiness and just not going to
Perfect.
work. But do that, dig in, you'll be good shape.
Perfect. So there were a few questions earlier on, and I'm going to try to kind of pull a few questions together. And
Yeah.
the theme of the questions were, I kind of work for an amateur leader.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So how do I kind of like bring this up, or should I bring this stuff that you're talking about and sharing with us? Is this something to bring up with my amateur boss, my boss who's an amateur leader, as you define it? Um, how do I approach that conversation? Or
Yeah.
do I
So
even approach that
yeah.
conversation?
Um, a couple of ways. Again, context is going to play a big part. Where you are, what you're doing, how important your relationship with that boss is. These can be very sensitive subjects. That was the point of my disclaimer at the beginning. I'm not judging you. I'm just showing you a different way to look at these situations. So in one case, if you have an amateur leader boss and you know this, right, you have to acknowledge that that's the environment that you're operating within. Now, if that's okay with you and you can get by and use other strategies like some of the ones I talk about in my book, and ultimately, feel good about your work and your organization and all that, then fine. If it is not to the point where you're going to be able to continuously engage in a meaningful way as a result of the behavior from that amateur leader, which is entirely possible, and I've had it happen many times, then it is important to take an honest look at whether or not you are in the right place. Now, the vast majority of leaders in the world as a whole, in the professional world as a whole, but specifically in the software world, in the high tech space where things are growing and moving faster than almost anything else, you're not going to find a ton of perfectly professional leaders. That is why,
first time leaders who don't know
right,
what the heck they're doing.
100%. That was why I wrote this book. Was I've had some incredible experiences, some incredible insights, some incredible coaching, and all kinds of stuff to bring together to help people learn how to transition from an amateur to a professional leader. Now, you can lead by example 100%. If you go through the work in the book and go through each of the strategies and understand how to apply that, even if you're in an IC role, right? You can have an impact on those other amateur leaders just simply by demonstrating what good looks like. They oftentimes don't know what good looks like. Again, why I show the contrast. So I would say focus on yourself. Number one, you are the single most important asset. You are the CEO of your career. You're in charge. There's nobody else who can make a call on what's right for you. Two, turn pro, invest in yourself, right? Get a copy of my book, get a copy of others, right? Focus on your own personal growth and development. Exhibit the behavior that you want to see in others. When I went through grad school and became a certified coach, and I was in a management position, I was desperately wanted to find some leader that would invest as much in me as I did in my team. Guess what? I never found it. Now I work for myself. Surprise, right?
Right.
It didn't exist. Right. But I made the decision after being frustrated for a number of years. I made the decision that nobody would ever know as much about leadership as me because it was such a passion area of mine. And I was going to do things for me, not wait for somebody else to enlighten me with other stuff. Right. I wasn't going to be in control.
I think we got time for one more question. I've been wanting to, Jason asked this question about 20 minutes ago. I've been wanting to get back to it. And I suspect you're going to probably say this comes back to kind of a social contract, that concept you were talking about in your presentation. But what he says here is, I manage a team. My CSMs get great results, but they aren't quite as aggressive as I would like them to be. And they rely on me to a great extent.
Yeah.
So I've told them they've got great instincts. They have my trust, and they need to trust themselves and act, but I still need to prod them.
Yeah. Absolutely.
What do you suggest?
Couple of things, and I'll refer back to the book for specifics to follow up as we're coming up on the end here. But number one, your coaching skills, right? Everything I cover in leading others, and the social contract is in that leading others pillar as well. But your coaching skills is what is going to get you out from being the bottleneck that I call, when everything is reliant on you. How do I do this? What should I do? What should I do next? All the constant questions where you want them just to take control and just do it because you trust them. Frankly, even though you tell them, they're still coming to you for behavior. So coaching skills are going to be critically important. And number two would be the social contract, right? In exhibiting that, going through the exercise of building that with your team. And one of the expectations that you bring to the surface is that you take complete ownership, number one, and that you drive above and beyond what you think you can do. And that's just, how I believe that this team needs to operate and can operate.
Awesome. And I think we're going to pause it there. I would love to spend another half hour going through all these other questions.
Me too.
And maybe we could have Niels on again and we'll kind of do another follow-up to all these questions. But really appreciate you taking the time. I learned a ton. I think everybody else would echo the same way. And is there any last advice, calls to action, anything that you'd like to put out there before we wrap up today, Niels?
Always remember that you are the CEO of your career. You're the chief, you're the strategist, and your single greatest asset is you. And your job as CEO of your career is to increase the value of you. That comes from turning pro, investing in yourself, no matter the cost, and not waiting for somebody else to send you a training or reimburse you for something you want to do. You need to take control and do it yourself, and is always going to pay an incredible return, no matter what. It will be the greatest investment return you will ever get is when you invest in yourself.
Amazing. Really appreciate it. Could not agree more with the advice you've shared.
Thank you.
And just on behalf of everybody else on the call, thank you so much. This has been fantastic. I learned a ton this hour. Really appreciate you taking the time. And I'll recommend, your book. I'll recommend everything else that you've talked about. So we'll leave it there. We have another session that I'm going to start promoting a week from today with Christy Falteruso. We've got an awesome session coming up with her.
Nice.
And I will hold on the topic because we're still finalizing a couple details, but keep an eye out. You'll get an email from me probably first thing in the morning on that one. Really pumped for that. And we will pause it there. Thanks everybody for your time.
Thanks so much, Mark. Take care, everyone. Cheers.
Thanks, guys.